Say goodbye to your boring, flat, lifeless art, and say hello to this thick, juicy, voluptuous way of shading skin. Before we even pick up a pencil, we can actually improve our art dramatically simply by observing what we see in real life and implementing that into our illustrations. In real life, we can see that there are a virtually endless amount of different complexions with different undertones and overtones. If you're into makeup, you probably already know why this is so important, but if not, that's okay. This video does a really good job at explaining why these different colors dictate the colors we use.
Let's do a little experiment. I'm going to be using a very pale foundation on the right side of my face and my normal foundation on the left side of my face. Every single product outside of the base products are going to be the exact same. This is going to show you guys how different the same makeup looks on different skin tones. The color of the makeup heavily depends upon the background it's laid upon. And this is called relative color, which is how the color is perceived by your eyes. This is why it's super important for brands to carry a variety of different shades, because the same color makeup looks extremely different depending upon the skin tone. This popular KVD Lolita lipstick looks extremely different on the two skin tones, and this next lip color straight up gave my natural skin tone concealer lips. I hope you guys enjoyed this little experiment, and please believe me.
So now that you've learned this, you have no excuse to draw every single character that same yellow pasty color. That's right, I'm talking to you. The light source will dictate not only the placement of shadows and highlights, but also the shape and color as well. Direct light tends to create shadows with a harsher line, and indirect light creates shadows that look more diffused. I was always so mesmerized by that one video where they take a light and spin it around this girl's face. She looks like a completely different person depending on the position and angle of the light. This is more or less the same concept. And lastly, we can observe value. For those of you who don't know, value refers to the lightness or darkness of a color. This goes for all aspects of coloring, not just when shading skin, but it is important to create dynamic value that will create more visually appealing and accurate colors within your rendering. Psst. Rendering refers to the stage where you add details to your drawing. This is also used interchangeably with shading. It may feel like I'm simply brushing over these concepts, but this video is actually part of an entire series where I deep dive into how to shade and render your digital art. This is the first video of many, so I really just want to brush over the basics and really lay a foundation. So if you would like a deeper dive into each one of these concepts, be sure to stay tuned. But for now, this is all you need to know. First things first, we need to pick our base colors. Or flat colors as the cool kids call them. The actual color itself doesn't matter all that much, but it does dictate the rest of the palette and set the mood for the entire drawing. Rule of thumbs, the brighter and more saturated your colors are, the more vibrant and happy your drawing will be. And likewise, the more darker and desaturated your colors are, the more melancholy and eerie your drawings will be. When I say saturated and desaturated, I'm referring to how close a color is to its hue. The closer a color is to its hue means the more saturated it will be, and colors that are closer to black and white are desaturated. Here are the colors that I've chosen for my flat colors. I'm doing an example for lighter skin and darker skin since we've established that there are an array of different complexions. Now that we've established our flat colors, we can start to pick the rest of the colors out within our palette. When choosing a darker color or the color that you intend to shade with, don't simply go with black or gray, or even just the same color as your flat color, just darker. You know some of y'all are guilty of doing this, and it's wrong, so let's stop this habit right now. What you want to do is pick a color that is 1, darker, and 2, more saturated. And if you want to be really fancy, you can even change up the hue a bit. Oh, je suis une femme fancy. For reference, here is the difference in saturation, value, and hue between my base color and my shading color. And now let's take that same idea and choose the colors for our highlight. Now we can talk about light sources. And for that, I think another science lesson is due. Settle down, kids, and listen up to your teacher. If light hits something, it will be highlighted. and whatever the light doesn't touch will be in shadow. We already knew this, but did you know that light also has this behavior where it likes to wrap its sticky little hands around objects? So you'll actually see a tiny bit of light on the opposite side of where the light is touching because it's wrapping around it. Light also does this thing where it creates a line where the shadow begins. I'm not really sure what this is called, I just know that it does this. Well, that concludes our lesson. More on that next week. As you can see, the light source is hitting the object here directly. And since this part is not being directly hit by the light, this part will be in shadow. And just to give it some more depth, I'm going to add an even darker value within the shadows. And if we refer back to science class, you'll see a bit of reflective light right here. The color of reflective light tends to vary because 1, it's being distorted, and 2, it's also meeting where the shadow begins. I like to add these little circles in my highlights and renderings simply because it's a stylistic choice. I don't know why, but I just think it looks nice. You can simply leave those out if you'd like, or you can incorporate them into your own art. There should be science and reasoning behind your art choices. That builds technique. But you should also take liberties you believe suits the piece. That builds style. Dang, I sounded super smart there. Vincent van Gogh could never. I actually made my own custom set of brushes in which you can get on my KOFI or my Patreon. They're completely optional and you don't need them to shade or draw, but I do recommend using a pencil brush or something similar. It's semi-hard, that's what she said. And pressure causes a change in the opacity rather than the line weight. Line weight is a fancy word for thickness. I also use an airbrush for diffuse shadows and gradients. For example, blush, I draw it with an airbrush. But some artists tend to overuse the airbrush when they're shading, and do not do this. It is one of my biggest pet peeves. Please do not do this. I repeat, do not do this. I think we've gone over everything we can about the basics of shading, so let's put our knowledge to use. You can use your own practice model, or you can get this one in the description below. As always, we'll start out with our flat colors and choose the rest of our palette accordingly. I'm starting off with some blush and gradients to give our model some life by making it look like her blood is actually circulating instead of being a lifeless corpse. I know I said in the title juicy, but I didn't mean decomposing bodily juices. Now we can use our light source as a guide and begin to add color for our first round of shadows. Everything the light touches, you leave it the f*** alone because it doesn't need shading. At this point, I like to go in and add my second round of shadows to give it more depth and make the rendering overall more dynamic. And like I said, in this stage, you can also add some stylistic touches. For me, I really like adding bubbles. Honey, put this here, cause honey say it look nice. And now we're ready to start highlighting, but here's a tip that probably no one else will tell you. I had to learn this the hard way. Only focus on either shadows or highlights, never both. If you focus on adding a lot of shadows and highlights within the same piece, your rendering will look too busy. So since we've added so much shadow, we're going to add highlights sparingly. And now that we're almost done, we can add the small details like these little shadow lines and reflective light. I usually know when to stop whenever I physically say, meh, looks good enough. I hope this video was helpful. If it was, be sure to tell me in the comments below. And if it wasn't, also tell me. I love hearing from you guys regardless. That being said, make sure you hit that little button that says subscribe on your way down there. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching this video and supporting me. And I want to give a special shout out to my patrons, Rattled the Second and ZomZom527. Bye!